the moment Chairman Comer was called a useful idiot, the room didn't just freeze, something far more explosive happened. For the first time, someone said out loud what everyone else had been whispering. That the Epstein files the public has been begging to see for years aren't being hidden to protect political enemies, they're being hidden to protect political allies. And once you hear what investigators reportedly found buried in those files, you'll understand exactly why everything suddenly went dark. For months, the country was told a shadowy network of powerful liberals was secretly tied to Epstein's operation. That was the story pushed online, repeated endlessly, and treated like gospel. Release the files, they screamed. Release every name, every record, every connection.
And Dan Bongino, over and over and over again. It is probably the #1 conspiracy theory on the online MAGA right. And it was pushed and pushed and pushed that they had to release the files, they should release the files. And Donald Trump was asked on the campaign trail, should the Jeffrey Epstein files be released? And he said yes. Donald Trump comes into office, and Pam Bondi releases a small portion of the Epstein files that had primarily already been public. There's an uproar on the right and by many, many members of Congress about why the Epstein files were not being released. Pam Bondi says, she writes a memo or an email saying that she wants an explanation for why there aren't more files that are released within 24 hours, and that within 2 weeks she intends to release them. Then the FBI spends tens of thousands of hours going through the files to redact them. Redact, obviously, what you would need to redact, which is the identification information and any other information about the victims. That lasts a couple months. All of a sudden, it goes quiet. It goes quiet. Suddenly, Congresswoman Luna and others who have been pushing so aggressively for the Epstein files to be released decide we're going to stay quiet. And all of a sudden, they're not released. Well, what do we learn next? Oh, we learn, actually, this whole right-wing conspiracy theory is BS. It is bogus, and Donald Trump is in the Epstein files. So now, all of a sudden, the Republicans who were so aggressively intent on releasing the Epstein files because they were going to be a huge, explosive story about Democrats involved with Jeffrey Epstein are quiet. So the irony of these Republicans accusing the Democrats now of only being interested in this is for political purposes is so thick that it is almost sucking us into the quicksand. But let's go a step further. Let's go a step further. Because now the cover-up is getting so deep and so intense that this committee, which has oversight over the Department of Justice and would ordinarily be the one that is doing this investigation, is running away from it. Why? Because Chairman Comer is the useful idiot who will do the cover-up for Donald Trump. And what does that mean? Oh, well, now there is an oversight investigation, but you know what they're not asking for?
Those kind of comments, and he knows that. Gentleman's recognized.
Now, the oversight committee is doing an investigation, but you know what they're not asking for? You know what you did not put in the rule to confirm that investigation? We're not asking for the documents that were used to open the investigation, who provided the information. They're not asking for witness statements, victim witness statements. They're not asking for recordings that may exist. They're not asking for any of the evidence that might include Donald Trump. And rather than acknowledge that you're just trying to cover up for Donald Trump's knowledge and involvement in the Jeffrey Epstein scheme, you're trying to accuse us of being interested, And there's one more point that I will say quickly. This conspiracy theory that you pushed for years is bogus. And when it comes out to the American people that it is bogus, then they will know that all of your other conspiracy theories are also bogus, and your credibility is nil. And I yield back.
It became the #1 conspiracy blockbuster on the far-right internet, shouted by influencers, amplified by shock podcasters, and fueled by accounts that live for outrage. They promised the files would blow the political world apart, that once everything came out, half of Washington would crumble. But when the moment finally arrived and the administration actually had the power to release every last page, the truth didn't explode outward. Instead, a strange quiet settled in. Papers trickled out, tiny pieces, mostly things that had already been public for years. Nothing new, nothing shocking. And that's when the outrage began bubbling inside the very movement that built the narrative. Where are the real files? Why aren't they releasing everything? Why does it look like someone's stalling? Pam Bondi stepped forward with a promise. She demanded a full explanation from the FBI within 24 hours and insisted she would release every remaining file within 2 weeks. People cheered. Finally, transparency. Or so they thought. Behind the scenes, the FBI began combing through tens of thousands of pages, redacting victim identities and sensitive details. The work was massive. Hours stacked up. Weeks passed. But then something strange happened. After all the noise and all the pressure, everything just stopped. No updates. No releases. No clarifications. The same lawmakers who spent years yelling about the files suddenly had nothing to say. And that's the moment Representative Dan Goldman stepped in and tore the lid off the story they didn't want anyone to touch. He walked through the entire timeline, not with theories but with receipts, step by step showing how the people who demanded the files the loudest became the quietest once the investigation turned inward. He pointed out something almost no one had noticed. The Oversight Committee, which should have been leading the charge for transparency, wasn't requesting any of the crucial evidence. No victim statements. No source documents. No agent reports. No recordings. Not even the materials used to open the investigation in the first place. It was an oversight investigation with no interest in oversight. And then Goldman delivered the blow that left the room stunned. He said the quiet part out loud. Those pushing hardest for the files were expecting a political weapon pointed at their opponents. But once investigators dug into the materials, once they started connecting timelines, names, meetings, flight logs, emails, rumors began swirling that the truth wasn't the story the movement had promised. According to reports and whispers from people close to the process, some of the names weren't just from one political side. Some of the connections didn't point outward, they pointed inward. And for certain powerful figures who built their entire brand on exposing corruption, suddenly releasing everything wasn't such a great idea. So instead of unleashing the files, the firestorm went silent. Goldman didn't call this a coincidence. He called it a cover-up. He said the same people who built a conspiracy narrative to paint their enemies as monsters suddenly realized the story might burn their own heroes too. And instead of staying consistent, they flipped the script. Overnight, transparency became dangerous. Accountability became optional. And truth became something that needed to be managed, not revealed. That he accused Chairman Comer of becoming the willing pawn in that game. Not the mastermind. Not the strategist. But the person being used to protect others while pretending to investigate them. A useful idiot, he called him. Someone running interference to shield the people he's supposed to scrutinize. And the most stunning part? No one in the room denied it. Not the timeline. Not the silence. Not the missing evidence requests. Nothing. Because how do you deny something when the public can see it happening in real time? Once you zoom out, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. When the files were believed to incriminate political opponents, release everything. No excuses. When the files reportedly included connections to allies, donors, influencers, and insiders, let's slow down. Let's investigate privately. Let's be responsible. And when the committee responsible for oversight had the chance to demand every last piece of evidence, they intentionally asked for almost nothing that mattered. This isn't just about one chairman or one congressman's accusation. It's about how narratives are manufactured, weaponized, and then buried once they stop serving their purpose. The Epstein case has always been wrapped in secrecy, rumors, and speculation. But the political circus built around it turned tragedy into ammunition. And the moment that ammunition became unstable, when it threatened to detonate in the wrong direction, the same voices who promised transparency locked the vault door. What's even more disturbing is how deeply this tactic has infected public debate. Every time a scandal surfaces, the same cycle repeats. Build a story. Push it hard. Rally people around it. Create heroes and villains. And the moment the truth gets too close to home, pivot, distract, pretend you never cared in the first place. Millions of people were told for years that the Epstein files would expose a single political faction. That one side was hiding something so dark and so massive it would reshape America. And today, those same voices pretend the files don't exist at all. The silence isn't accidental. It's strategic. And maybe the most revealing detail is that the one thing this committee refuses to ask for is the exact evidence that would clear everything up. If they truly believe their original narrative, they would demand every file, every statement, every document without hesitation. Instead, they designed an investigation that stays carefully away from anything that might be damaging to their own side. That's not transparency. That's theater. Goldman pulled the curtain back on that theater, exposing not just hypocrisy but fear. The kind of fear that tells you something inside those files is far more complicated than the internet ever admitted. And until the full truth is released, until every political side is held to the same standard, we're stuck watching leaders use the same tired playbook. Scream for justice when it helps them, and bury the evidence when it doesn't. If this is the first time you're seeing the full picture without the spin, you're in the right place. We break these stories down without the noise, without the manipulation, and without the narratives designed to mislead you. If you want more deep dive breakdowns like this, stories that cut through the chaos, make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on notifications so you never miss when we drop the next one.